Shemai Croeso, hello and welcome to episode 45 of the Bluebirds Nest. No league fixtures for a few weeks, as obviously last weekend our fixture brought the close of phase one of the Cymru Premier season. So the perfect time, I think, to invite one of the club's great characters onto the next year. As you can see, affectionately known as Waggy, first team assistant manager, Mr. Gary Richards. Waggy, welcome to the Nest.
Thanks very much for the invite, Ryan.
It's well, you've dodged my invite for long enough now, but I think it is a great time to chat to you, get a bit of insight, and obviously reflect on the season so far. This is all, well, the start anyway. I think it's going to sound a bit like this is your life, but you have had such a great career to date. I thought I knew a lot about you from our car sharing and our bus trips around Wales over the last few years, but there's still so much I wanna get out and ask you. But coming up to 3 years at the club, but yeah, let's start at the beginning. You turned pro back in the early 80s. You made your debut at Swansea City's, well, an away trip to Villa Park of all places. The 81-82 season, I think that was, well, according to your Wikipedia, and it was the last Villa game before they went on to win the European Cup. I think the following season was your real breakthrough season, 82-83. You picked up the Young Player of the Year award at the Swans that year, but you know, household names in the squad, Toshak, Curtis, etc., to name a few. It was probably, you know, a lot different football back then. What was it like then, you know, starting off at the Swans?
Yeah, as I grew up, you know, I would say I'm an August birth. At the time, I didn't really think much of it. You know, now with the science of football, we know about relative age effect. So, like, I would say I was never the best player in my school. I was always in the top 3 or 4, but you know, never the best. You know, so I never represented Swansea school, say at under 11. I scraped in at under 13. You know, a bit better under 15, but I would say I was never in the best team if they picked it. When I did have success, being August birth, I could drop down a year. So I stayed in Swansea schoolboys for a second year, and then I became the oldest, so a lot more effective and, you know, certainly one of the best players. Well, Swansea offered me an apprenticeship in '79, which I was obviously over the moon delighted with. They reneged on it a little bit, and it turned into like a 6-month trial. So they took 11 players on in '79 as apprentices, 2 years, and I was the one who got offered a 6-month trial. So I went down, certainly quite low down the pecking order, and I knew that. At the time, it was probably because I lacked a bit of physicality and strength, but I didn't really know that at the time. So I started my life as an apprentice footballer around all those people I idolized. So it was a great feeling seeing those players. And back in those days, we used to do our apprenticeship, our pre-season, up in Fairwood, where the current first team facility is, the fantastic facility up there. And during the season, the players used to come into the Vets Field. They used to get changed there, and then we used to drive up to a place called Oko, which is where Amazon is now.
Okay, yeah.
So I started pre-season down there. I think every footballer will tell you pre-season always seems to be the hottest weeks ever. We didn't do a tremendous amount of running because John Toshak brought the Liverpool way there. So, but we still had to run. And my first thing I remember, I think, really is that probably into my second or third week in pre-season, we had like 11v11. And perhaps they picked 3 teams of 11. One team be off, perhaps playing, you know, doing crossing and finishing, or doing some running, or doing something, and 2 teams would play each other. And my first thing I remember was that in that 11v11, quite early on, I was playing left back, and the ball got sprayed out to the right, and I'm facing Alan Curtis. Everyone idolises in Swansea. I'd seen him from the terraces. I idolised him myself. So Alan's running at me, and I thought, well, this might be a good time to set the marker. You know, what a good start this would be if if I pinched the ball off him or I stopped the cross. So I'd seen him many times. I knew if he dropped his shoulder, he had snake hips, Alan, but I knew if he dropped his shoulder to the left, he's probably going to go on the outside of me. If he dropped it down the side, he'd be cutting inside. So I was ready for him, right?
Yeah.
He ran at me, and as I guessed, he dropped his shoulder to the left. I knew he was going to go outside, so I was ready to set the marker, get people talking about me. So he's gone down. He's gone to cross the ball. I've mirrored his right foot, and I thought I've blocked the cross here. You know what a start to my football career this is. And he's only going to stick the ball through my legs. He's cut inside the centre half, and he's curled it in top corner. To make it worse, the ball stuck in the stand.
Amazing.
I rocked around, and I just see people laughing. You know, they're probably laughing at the genius of Alan Curtis, but it felt like, you know, they were laughing at me. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, what have you gone and done? You know, I should be at Rotherslade Beach here, my mates topping up my tan, and I felt completely out of my, you know, comfort zone. You know,
that's brilliant.
And then you get the day of the banter, you know, shut your legs, waggy boy, and players were brutal. So, you know, my first experience was something that taught me, you know, quite a tough lesson, and perhaps not that day, but a couple of days later, perhaps I thought to myself, if I'm going to make a go of this, you know, I'm going to have to get better.
Yeah, well, you certainly did, because they ended up offering you, like I said, pro terms, and you had several seasons at the Swans. And as a youngster, and I think I put this into context in our current dressing room, you got lots of youngsters just this week. Obviously, Jacob Owen was announced as the latest to sign an 18-month deal, you know, on pro terms, effectively. So what was that like then, you know, learning from the likes of, you just said, Toshak and Curtis? What was the structure of the week back then?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to where it is now. You'd go up with the first team. John Toshak used to get us involved with the first team in the morning, more often than not, sometimes 3 groups all mixed. So very early on in my Swansea days, the apprentices found themselves in with the first team. In the afternoon, perhaps you'd split off to the youth team, unless the first team wanted you. But you know, there was huge opportunities to learn, and I have to be fair. I was one of quite a few that, you know, the experienced players helped a lot. People like Wyndham Evans, John Mahoney, Leighton Phillips. You know, there was loads of them who kind of took us under their wing and looked after us. You know, you had to work hard alongside that, but you know, some great professionals there at that time.
I can imagine. And as I said, football was a lot different back then. No doubt they were looking after you on the pitch and around the streets, the wine streets of Swansea, probably as well.
Yeah, you kind of, back in those days, you played hard. You had to work hard, but you played hard as well. You know, there was a kind of a small drinking culture around the place, but again, it was opportunities to get to know the players better, you know.
Definitely.
Fantastic days. And full-time football kind of suited me. I found myself improving all the time, you know, overtaking a lot of those players who joined the same time as me, not all of them, because, you know, we had people like Dudley Lewis and Jimmy Loveridge, who were the same age as me, who also had careers. But I found myself overtaking a lot of them. So, you know, at the time, a real good feeling of just getting better week in week, week after week, month after month. A fantastic feeling.
Yeah, and as I said, you had a number of successful years. I think, you know, to get Young Player of the Year award at any club is a, you know, showing that you've developed and were doing your very best. But to get it at the Swans, like you said, a couple of those names there, household names, I suppose. Many Swans followers will be aware of those. So to come out on top of that is some accolade. No doubt it's on a shelf somewhere with you in the house, and or some sort of shrine to your footballing days. But let's get on the journey then, because you went abroad shortly after the Swans over to Sweden. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think although I say I had a lot of success at Swansea, you know, it came with relegation. So although things were great for me personally, you know, we also had, the heartache of a couple of relegations. And I have to be honest, as we dropped down the leagues, it seemed to become more difficult. When we hit the third division, we changed a few managers. John Bond came in and kind of released a lot of the local lads. Myself, people like Dean Saunders left the same time as me. So you finish that season out of work. First time it ever happened to me, and you're waiting to see what comes in. The PF in those days, no agents or nothing like that. You kind of had to write letters, or the PFA, circulated your name perhaps, and I'm waiting and only 2 offers came in initially. I had a chance to go to Australia for 2 years, to Perth, or the Sweden opportunity came. So, and that was like towards the end of their season. So that looked more like 3 or 4 months. So I kind of was hoping that one day I'd get back into the Football League. So I didn't want to leave the UK for too long. So I looked into the Sweden thing. They flew me out to Sweden they said for me to have a look at them, but it was, for them to look at me as well.
Yeah.
And then they offered me a contract for, their end of season, which was 3 months. And again, I found it quite difficult when I first got over there. But again, things started to get a little easier, and my performances got better. And at the end, as we were coming to the end of that, they offered me to stay out there for the following season. But I wouldn't be a full-time professional. I'd have a job alongside, so it was something to consider. But I was sat in my apartment in Sweden one night, and the phone went, and it was Phil Bosma who was at Lincoln City offering me a route back into the Football League.
Right. Okay. And that obviously leads us in, and you did come back to the Football League. I think Cambridge as well. I think you were the 85-86 season at Abbey Stadium, I think, in Cambridge. Then West, then I suppose, to Torquay.
Yeah, right? I finished at Cambridge. That was like a 2-month loan. Okay. And from the end of the season, my old youth team manager at Swansea, Les Chapo, was assistant manager at Torquay. So they gave me a phone call and asked me if I'd be interested in going down to the English Riviera.
Well, yeah, I wondered how you thought, because you're stretching the breadth of England there to go from one side to the other. But it was on your 25th appearance, I believe, for Torquay United. You scored your first goal after just 16 seconds. So I suppose the emotions in that game, you were buzzing probably around the pitch, but then disaster with the first of your 2 serious knee injuries that pretty much the first one brought an end to your professional playing career. But what was the first? Was it a tackle, or how did you do the first one?
Yeah, quite innocuous, really. I remember receiving a ball in. Things were going quite well. I'd obviously scored. I felt in good nick. And about 10, not long after the goal, really, 10, 15 minutes, they had a boy on loan from Sunderland, Swansea, and I just remember him clattering into the back of me, really. I'm just feeling something in my knee that I'd never felt before. Didn't worry too much about it because I can't remember if I had treatment, but I got up and carried on playing. It didn't feel 100%, but I felt okay. And then I remember trying to get into the box. I thought I was going to score another goal, and they cut the ball back just behind me. I tried to put the brakes on, and I just remember like a jolt and a shudder right through my knees. Something, I knew I was in trouble as soon as it happened.
And that was against Swansea, that game, was it? I didn't realise that.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I'd scored against my hometown club, and 17 minutes after the goal, I was getting stretched off. And, yeah, and listen, the medically, it wasn't as good back then. I kind of got stretched off into the away changing room. The physio had a quick look at it. He said, I'm going to have to get back out. I was kind of left in there, really, with a ruptured cruciate. We didn't know at the time. And I ended up limping back out towards the end of the game. We finished 1-0 winners, which was nice for me, but it didn't feel good at the time. No. And then it was a 4-hour journey home on the bus. And then I found out the following day when I went into hospital, my cruciate was ruptured, and slowly but surely you start to realise back then how serious the injury was.
Yeah. Well, I think it was every cloud, I suppose, for some respects, because that gave you your first taste of coaching, I believe. During rehab, when you were back on your feet a bit more, you were coaching the youth and the reserve teams at Torquay. I think they originally, I think you've mentioned about, they offered you, a bit of a coaching route and a pathway there, but you wanted to get back playing. Newport County, I think you went to at some point then. Were they Football League at the time?
Yeah, Cyril knows was manager Torquay, and he called me in and said, "Listen, you know, you can see out your contract here. We like having you around, but come the end of the season, back in those days, that league had squads of perhaps 14 if they were 14, 15 if they were lucky. So he said,
Mad.
by the end of the season, you have to be my team." So there was like a message in there, to be fair to Cyril.
Yeah.
He said, "Newport have come in for you. Say it's a drop down to the conference." I didn't feel the same after the injury. So I had to think about it and thought it was a good idea. I
Yeah.
ended up going to Newport then, and that's when Cyril rang me back to offer me the full-time role. At, I was back playing then, and
Yeah.
I was captain of Newport at the time, and it was just great to be back playing,
Yeah.
fairly decent level of football. So I turned that offer down.
Okay. I think that led into a couple of other.
Yeah, but it did resonate with me that someone perhaps saw the potential to be a coach one day.
Coach.
I was only middle 20s or late
Yeah.
20s, but perhaps Cyril did see something in me that
Well,
perhaps
definitely,
yeah,
definitely, and we will come on to that. You can see your career path. Obviously, this week I've been looking into it even more than what I did. Well, perhaps what I was aware of already with your career pathway from player to coach, etc. But you dotted around Wales. I think Barry, I think, is on your Wikipedia, but also Haverfordwest. Now, is that true? I didn't realize you played for the
yeah.
Bluebirds.
Listen, I don't want this to sound like a hard luck story, but we were we were at Newport, and a Canadian was in charge, and he run the club down. We drove into Sundon Park to train one day, and the gates were locked. And that was the end of Newport at Sundon Park that day. They never went back there.
Right.
So I was kind of kicking my heels, really, not knowing if Newport were going to start back. So that's when I kind of tried a few different clubs. I played for Saltash down in Cornwall. I had 1 or 2 games at Barnstable, and then Barry came, and it was a kind of opportunity to move back to Wales, back to Swansea.
Brilliant. I didn't realize that, but yeah, it says on there that your second and probably the last knee injury, the second serious one, happened playing for Haverfordwest County though. But
Yeah, we were playing Hendersfoot. I don't know what but I remember it was a horrible night weather-wise, and again, I remember being taken on, and I've just gone to turn, and cruciate snapped again. It's
yeah,
exactly the same injury. The
incredible. Well, I've seen the scars you've got on the knee, and it's no wonder you had to stop, to be honest. And so we've gone through your playing. I haven't even mentioned your goal scoring exploits with the Wales age grade teams. There was a couple of goals I saw on your stats, but fair play. That's some career you had playing. But the proper start of your coaching career, then I suppose, and it's, as I said, it's evident to see it's escalated to where you've got to today. Initially, I think part time at the Swans, whilst obviously infamously as a postman as well. Then a sabbatical, then obviously offered full time. What was that like then? Your hometown club, and you've been offered a full time gig there. What was that like?
Yeah, when I moved back, and I took a job in Royal Mail, I did. I always felt I had to do like an apprenticeship in coaching, so I did a lot of grassroots work first. Because it resonated me again with people who used to take my team when I was in the junior teams. The time they give, and so I definitely did a lot in grassroots first. I did some coaching in junior schools and different things, and the special needs team. And
Yeah,
I
of
turned
course.
down a couple. I turned down a couple of opportunities to go into the Swansea City Centre of Excellence at the time from 2 or 3 academy managers, because I just couldn't see how I had the time working in Royal Mail. and the other stuff I was enjoying doing voluntarily. So, but then Alan Curtis took over the academy, and he offered me an opportunity to come in and take a 16. So I said yes, and in 2001, that's when that started.
Yeah, and literally, I think from that moment, again, it's testament to you and your coaching. You progressed annually. I think looking at almost your CV online, you were 16s, then 18s, and then obviously all the way up to the 23s, wasn't it? In just a couple of years.
Yeah, I did 2001 to 2011. I was pretty much the under 16s coach, if I'm honest. And then the academy setup started, and that coincided, funny enough, with Tony Pennock taking over. So Tony offered me a full-time job at the club, taking the 16s initially. So in 2011, it seemed a hard decision at the time. I'm glad I took it, but I left Royal Mail after 17, 18 years there, and took up a full-time job in football at Swansea.
Yeah, well, it's so you've got so many coincidences and almost like full circles involved in your. You mentioned your first sort of time working with Pennock there and things like that. It's fascinating, but the 23s then, because that was a golden generation, I think, for the Swans. There's the roll call of players with them are Joe Roden, Connor Roberts, McBurney, Dan James. You can go on. There's so many there. What to come through, you must have probably seen them through the age grades as well. But at the 23s, for that crop of players at the Swans, what was that like? Could you see that they were going to go all the way? Some of those guys.
Well, you listen. You'd be a rich man if you knew for definite. But we were very optimistic with our local boys. Joe Roden, Tony will tell you if you speak to him. We were hopeful because he was so good. He used to beat himself up a lot, man, over every mistake. But again, we just thought he had a chance. Connor Roberts. Well, funny enough, Connor's probably surprised me the most. I thought he'd have a career, but Connor's taught me a big lesson in academy football, that if you work hard and you have the right attitude, how far you can get. With the others, the chairman, Hugh Jenkins, he had a lot of foresight, and he kind of turned the academy into perhaps a more business model where you had a good recruitment staff out and about. And they identified a number of targets like Dan James and Ollie McBurney that perhaps we could get in, and they'd be an asset to the first team one day. So he kind of changed the model a little bit with the academy, and we started buying a few players in, like Jay Fulton as well. And then they were put into the 23s, and the good thing about that is we benefited. Being a coach of the 23s at the time, we obviously benefited from that.
Massively so. And obviously at the 23s, your former teammate's son, obviously Cameron Toshak was the manager, and obviously you as his trusted assistant, you definitely did benefit. I think, was it the first season then that you obviously won the PDL Division 2 title, and you had a decent cup run in the EFL Trophy, and I think it was the International Premier League International Cup as well, is it?
Yeah, some of the things the Premier League used to do back then for players and coaches, it was a great place to be. There's a lot of opportunities to learn, on courses I used to go on as a coach, but also for the players. They put on a lot of different things, and the International Cup was great because teams like Porto would come and play us. We always had the argument, like, it would be better for our teams, mind, if we travelled to them. But they were unable to do that. But our players got the opportunity, and us as coaches got the opportunity to play against international teams. And the EFL was pivotal because you got the chance to play against senior teams. So again, that trophy was great opportunity for the players to develop and progress.
Definitely, and it's testament to the job you did there and where those guys are now. And I'm sure if you were to ask them one day they'll hold you and Cameron, in high regard there for the support you did at such a pivotal point in their career, I guess. You were obviously a man continually progressing at the Swans. The ultimate, I suppose, opportunity came then as, was it Paul Clement's exit of the Swans gave caretaker manager Leon Britton the opportunity in the hot seat, and he came calling for both you and Cameron. I think I'm right in saying, and you had a chance to be an assistant coach in the Premier League. Is that right? Have I got the timelines right with that?
Yeah, Paul Clement left. Hugh Jenkins probably had an idea of the direction he wanted to take, but in the meantime, he put Leon in charge, and he asked me and Cameron to move up. So again, great opportunity to go and get a couple of games in the Premier League. Something you only dream about.
Definitely. You say a couple of games. You're very, very modest there. One of them, I think your second game was away at Liverpool.
Yeah, we played Palace first at the Liberty. They scored first, and we got an equaliser. So we drew 1-1. So you sat there after the game having a bit of food, thinking this job's easy. First game, I'll have more of this, and then our second game, it was over the Christmas period, was away to Liverpool, and I realised then that the game isn't too easy.
To have Anfield on your CV is immense, and I'm sure the grandkids probably like hearing that story over and over again. But you've mentioned it many times to me. I love it. Tell us that you're doing your pre-match warm-up, and obviously, infamously, Klopp will stand on the halfway line watching his opposition. Did that happen?
Yeah, but you forget it's gonna happen, because he does it all the time. So I did the initial part of the warm up, the passing, and as I move into a different position, he's there. No more than 30 yards away with his arms folded, staring at my passing drill. A bit intimidating, if I'm honest. But he does it to everybody. But and even the mind games at somewhere like Liverpool, Alan Curtis pre-warned us that be careful, because they'll wheel the goals you shoot in. They normally put them on the side of the pitch, and they were there ready for us. He said, be careful, and they'll move them. So I went on, before the players came out for the warm-up, and said, this goal is staying here now, isn't it? And they said, well, of course it is. It's for you, for shooting. So I thought, great. We did our warm-up, and our possession, we turned the goal at gone. They wheeled it off. So mind games.
But those youngsters.
But listen, the whole experience, apart from the result, was fantastic at Liverpool. Again, as when you first start on the coaching journey, who could guess that one day I'd get the opportunity to, help take a team of Liverpool. Fantastic.
Yeah. Unreal, mate. And it's no surprise that again a major opportunity comes next, I suppose, this is your life journey. Paphos, the Cypriot Premier Division team, came calling for Cameron, who obviously took you with him as again trusted assistant. A record-breaking season for that club. Warm weather, football every day. I suppose that would have been a difference to what you were used to at probably Llandor by that time, was it?
Yeah. I was sat at Fairwood one day, and I had a text through saying, it's so and so here. I hope you remember me. I did the audit at the academy. I'm a sporting director of Paphos. Wonder if you and Cameron would be interested in coming. Well, my first, I was, everything was good at Swansea then, and I had no intention of moving anywhere. But Cam was on the verge of going on a different journey, so I kind of handed it to him to speak to him. And at the time, I was on a very good course called ECAS, so I was on the verge of going out to Benfica to see how they work. So I left that with Cameron, and off I went to Benfica, and that kind of material. It was on and off a bit, and then Cameron, he said, "Listen, it's on. Are you going to come?" And Tough decision,
Yeah,
because when you move into senior football, one or two things that happen in the end. You either progress to something better or you get the sack. And at Swansea, things were going well. I was reasonably well thought of.
yeah,
So it was a tough decision, but I kind of got brought up, regretting things you don't do rather than you do. So, I had a sneaky look at Paphos mine, and I could see how nice that looked. So that helped as well. So
yeah, I can imagine.
off I went.
I can imagine. I'm sure it would have been tough over there in what 30 odd degrees every day. Football. I've seen some of the footage of the club that put out nowadays, and it looks a great setup. And like I said, a record-breaking season that year for the club. So another successful spell working alongside Cam and that. But from sunny Cyprus to the coastal paradise that is Pembrokeshire, I suppose, comes next in the journey.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I haven't had one day where it's been as warm here as.
This summer now, maybe 3 roller coaster years to say the very least, I suppose. Out of all those stories we've just been through, very emotional ride the last few years. Obviously, you've worked alongside 3 managers. Let's start with Wolvesy then. Let's start a little bit. What was it like? What did you know him previously, and what was that experience like with him?
When you start in the coaching, you have to do your badges, and I was on my A license same time as Wolvesy, and I remember being there with there were a lot of stars there, a lot of stars on the course, ex Tim Sherwood and some big characters there, and I just remember someone bursting in through the door. It was like a hurricane, and I didn't know him at the time. It was Wayne, and I thought, I remember thinking, God, big personality. First thing I thought straight away, seemed to know a lot of people, very bubbly, energy, just, and I got to know him a little bit during the A license, and then I think Wayne had a real good run in the first phase, and then I think things hadn't gone quite so well in second phase, and I was back from Cyprus, so he rang me up and asked me if I fancied it. So I jumped in it, and listen, I absolutely loved working with Wayne. He was tremendous. He loves the club, and we had a real good time. I used to meet up with him at Carmarthen. He used to drive me everywhere, so that was good. And I had a great time with him.
Yeah, some very memorable bus trips back from North Wales, to say the least, on a couple of those nights. Obviously, his departure gave you the opportunity at. Let's talk about that. What was that like for you? It must have been shell shocking, I suppose.
Listen, towards the end, we all know Wayne's love for the club. We weren't getting the results we were hoping for, and he found it tough, and him finding it tough made it quite tough for me, because it was hard to see him, as down as what he was. But I was still really disappointed that he left. I was hoping he'd stay in there, but listen, Wayne knows what's best for him.
Yeah, definitely. He's come on the Nest previously and spoken about where his head was at, and it was a sad time, but I speak to him regularly now, and he still says it was the right decision for the club, and that's testament to him, I suppose, isn't it? To allow the club to go on to what we've had, excuse me, ever since then, I suppose. But
and what I'd say about Wayne, it shouldn't surprise me, but his knowledge of the Welsh Prem was phenomenal. He seemed to know every player, everything about them. So much knowledge about the league.
Yeah, loves it. And he still does, follow the club extensively. He's often on the phone calls and texts saying great result and how's things. And he's obviously been down to the Oggy Bridge Meadow many times as well, which he said he would. That must be quite difficult to do, I suppose. Having been invested so heavily for, best part of 2 decades to come down now, perhaps, not being day-to-day part of it, but he is obviously very much still a part of what the club's all about, I suppose.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't find it hard, because the more the more we see of them, the more, yeah.
He certainly wouldn't. You'd hear him coming anyway. You're right about him barging through doors. That doesn't surprise me. That obviously.
Mind you, having said that, the last time he was down, I gave him a lift home.
Oh yeah,
nightmare.
we keep it PG, should we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've been chauffeur many times from the West. His departure, Nicky ended up being announced over Christmas, didn't he? But with visa problems and things like that, you initially said you didn't want to be the interim manager, but then when Jazz and Pems, etc., that all unfolded, you did take the hot seat. I look back fondly. It was a great period. That it was the sort of pivotal period of the season, wasn't it? But one of my favourite ever results. You were the man in charge that night up at Aberystwyth when we won 6-0. You must have been thinking, this is easy, this management, Lackey.
Yeah, I wish. The Nicky was ill that day, so he couldn't come. Right. He had COVID, but you are right. Aberystwyth always give us a tough game, and that's the way I was expecting it to be. But on the night, everything seemed to go for us. Toure got a hat-trick for us, I think, and we kind of quite clinical in front of goal. So I thought to myself, if games are like that all the time, I'd happily stay in charge.
I wish.
We know they're not always like that.
Yeah, if only. But no, you're right. It did just click that night, didn't it? And it spurred us on to have a great end of the season that year. But I think on reflection, Nicky's arrival, it was almost a line in the sand moment for the club. As I said, with Wolvesy almost stepping away to let the club develop. The pro license is such a big factor in it, and Nicky's experience coming in, his new way of approaching. I think for the club, it was a big transition period on and off the pitch, I must say. How did you find working alongside Nicky?
Yeah, I was grateful to Rob for allowing me into the recruitment process. So a couple of people who applied, I was in looking at the presentations, and we did them over Zoom. So I quite enjoyed that. That was new to me. So I'm grateful to Rob for allowing it. I have to be fair to Rob. He showed a lot of foresight in bringing Nicky in. It was a big gamble bringing him from abroad, but he had full confidence, Rob, and you could see Nicky was impressive on his interview. So you're always hopeful, but you never know bringing someone in from another country. But he was great. Yeah, when Nicky was here, I thoroughly enjoyed working with him. I learned a lot from him. I'd like to think we had a good working relationship. So I thoroughly enjoyed being assistant under Nicky.
Yeah, it was a shock, I think. However, it wasn't, if that makes sense, when obviously Club Bruges came calling. And again, whilst we were perhaps reeling a bit, I think it's every cloud. Again, it's that circumstance, coincidence and how things are meant to be. And obviously, it kicks in then that your former colleague, as you've mentioned, Tony, comes in as the gaffer. And, it was just a perfect fit for the club. You were obviously losing a pro license holder, but gaining one as well. And as much as, I enjoyed my time working alongside Nicky in the sort of media sort of part of the club, but Tony knew the league already. There was a lot of extra things that Tony had to his CV, but that, again, was another recruitment process that all the boxes were getting ticked with Tony. And I think a challenge for the board to replace, that level of coach in a pretty short time, turnaround, because pre-season had started. Nicky had signed players. So for Tony to come in and sort of having to not even sort of find his feet, he had to come in. And I think one of his first fixtures was a league game as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I remember, I've always kept in touch with Tony. I knew perhaps his time at Hull was coming to an end, his choice. And suddenly the vacancy came up. So I did ring Tony saying, would you be interested? Is it worth me putting your name forward? Yeah. And he said, no, and he said I wouldn't mind the conversation. And I remember ringing Rob and telling him, and he said, you're a bit late. I think Wayne had already rung him, so he had thrown his name in as well. So, and then and then you kind of keep out of it. And let Rob and Tony have a discussion. And although you're always hoping that they can sort something out, because I knew how Tony worked, and I knew he'd be an asset to the club.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, it was a great appointment and a very quick turnaround to get that over the line. And obviously, looking back on reflection now, it's been a tremendously successful period for the club. But you mentioned the relationship. You two have got a really good, working and sort of social relationship together. You almost sometimes telepathically know each other so well, you can almost second guess each other. And that's obviously come from, working together for so long and, having that personal bond as well. But it's only the tip of the iceberg that I think people see on a match day. You're both so meticulous in your preparation, your planning for every possible outcome of a game, and how things are going to unfold in the game. There was months of hard work to get us. Let's focus on the playoffs initially. The preparation for each of this game, particularly in that phase 2. Tony mentioned 10 cup finals, and they really were looked at as one game at a time to get us over the line. But that it was almost relief when we did it at the end of the playoffs. It wasn't just those 2 games that you'd prepared for. It was the whole. There was a real plan across those months. You must have been so proud of that to get us over the line.
Yeah. Listen, who knows if you sneak into the top 6? We've spoken about it many times. You want to be in the top 6, always. But the games are harder. The benefit of the way it worked out was we managed to get a bit of momentum going. Always felt we were going to win games. Yeah. Every game we played, we thought we were going to have a chance of winning it. So we certainly built momentum through those games and into the playoffs, as you know.
It was tremendous. A great time in the club's history. But Europe, then, the sort of the experience, the adventure that everything came with that. Months on now, when you look back, what are your feelings? What are your thoughts on the whole experience at Europe?
Yeah, well, and what I have to touch back on is you said about the way me and Tony work. When Tony was my boss at Swansea City, I was on the wrong end of his tongue a few times, man. He had very high. He's always had really high standards, and for players and his staff. If you met those expectations, he's the best person in the world to work for. He'll give you anything. If you don't, you sometimes, get a year for. But again, Tony was a type when I was working in the academy that if he saw you working too many hours, he'd come in and say, "You don't come in tomorrow," and even if he wanted to, you didn't come in. So you always knew Tony would look after you, but still keep those standards. And that's the way we went into Europe. Again, his preparation was meticulous for the game. He knew how he wanted to set up as soon as he saw the opposition. And, we had a plan. We had a plan of the way we wanted to play. And, from the very start, I was lucky enough as a player to experience Europe. I didn't play in them, but as a young pro, Swansea used to win the Welsh Cup a few times. So I had a couple of great trips in Europe with the first team squad. We went to Paris, played Paris Saint-Germain, and we went to East Germany to play Magdeburg. So I had the feeling of playing in Europe, and now how good it could be. But obviously, as a coach, it's different. So that firstly getting there was an unbelievable experience, and then the first game, you were there. Fantastic. We had to ride a bit of a storm out there. They were decent. We rode our luck a little bit at times, but we stayed in the game, and that set up the second leg brilliantly, I thought.
Yeah, you've just said it, like we had a plan, and that's exactly. And I think the documentary sort of plays an insight into that. There's no coincidence when Tony's saying in the team talks previously, even if it goes to the 85th minute, and and on the 70th minute we'll change it up. I'll throw everything at it, and that's literally what happened. It was that meticulous, and that was the game plan. Almost letting them tire themselves out, the opposition, and then strike, I suppose, as crucially as we did. But tremendous. When I look back at you, obviously the games are the highlight of it all, but there's one highlight I want to bring up with you, and it started about 2 o'clock in the morning after the Skendia game. You probably know what I'm going to say here, but I can't help but smile when I look back at that night. It was we'd lost 1-0. I've never celebrated a loss, but it felt like a win because everybody had said, if we keep it, a 2-goal swing, a 3-goal swing would be an achievement. So 1-0 felt like we'd secured a draw almost, and we celebrated. My God, we celebrated. I think some of us didn't go to bed. Some of us went to bed and had about half hour's sleep, but music was blaring. We had our own section of the hotel, didn't we? And as the night got sort of more enjoyable and hectic, we ended up standing on chairs singing, and we've mentioned your bad knees. And it was Tony half the time would say, right, everyone up, sing the song. And I can just see you now trying to get up onto the chair. By the time you've got on the chair, the song's finished and you get it back down. Yeah, I'm sure he was doing it for devilment half the time.
Yeah, listen, the football, the aftermath, the memories, we'll never forget. I'll never forget the 2 games. And what it does do, it gives you the taste for more.
Yeah, definitely. Well, where does it stand then? We've outlined your career. You've mentioned just now that you've obviously had experience in Europe as well. We've mentioned Liverpool. We've only touched on some of the key highlights, I guess. Where does it stand as, of all your career milestones and achievements and things? Where does the European trip, sit?
The period we spoke about at the start, that 1979 to about 82, it felt it was the best feeling of my life, football wise.
Yeah.
But this comes a very close second to it, I think. Because we know in Europe, getting there was a fantastic achievement in the first place. But we know when you're there, unless you're very fortunate, you're going to get a draw against a team whose budgets are huge, whose playing experience is going to be high, international players. So to get a result and come so close in a second, I think is a phenomenal achievement. So I think it ranks, second to that, because at Swansea you're there full time. It's all you do is football. With Haverfordwest, we got jobs. Most of us have got jobs alongside it, so you actually have less time to affect the players. So you've got to work really smart, and in Europe even more so. The club did it the right way, right? Didn't they? They got us away, so we were able to spend some time and put some real work in. The rest of the season, you've got to work really smart if you want to do well in the league, and I think we have since Tony come in.
Yeah, definitely. And that it brings us up to this season. Excuse me. Yes, the results weren't great at the start of the season, but considering how many new players we had in, it was pretty much almost half a new squad. And I think those times in Skopje, in North Macedonia, in the Faroe Islands, even over to Ireland, those social times the players had together, I think have really stood us in good stead, because there's a real unity in the dressing room I've seen across phase one. And that's, when we have been needed to go in the trenches and things like that, when games haven't been going our way, there is a real togetherness. So, obviously the start was tricky. We had a couple of results that probably we were thinking we should have done better at. But as we've come to the end of phase one, is that how you'd summarize it? Almost we're on an upward trajectory now, do you think?
Yeah, you hope so. I think if we're honest, we've been, I think we've lacked that we would have liked to have been more consistent. I think we've had some real terrific performances. Connors Key away and
Yeah,
Penabon first half, and we've given some real top performances. And you think it's going to kick you on to get, you know, the next one's going to come after that, and the one after that, and it hasn't quite worked out that
mm,
way. So I think we haven't quite built on some of our good performances, which is why we've missed out in the top six.
yeah,
Because I think we feel that's been achievable this year, and we just haven't managed to do it. So we're a bit disappointed that way. But
mm,
what you have to do is shake yourself off and make
yeah.
sure the second phase now is we're strong and we're ready to go again.
Definitely. And I think we need to, because obviously, and I've said this, I've spoken extensively to people recently, on the close of phase one now, you're looking at the league. There's no, for want of a better word, whipping boys this year. In the last few seasons, there's been almost your rock bottom team in 12th who are cast away very early on in the season. It's so competitive, particularly the bottom six this year. Any one of the clubs, perhaps right down the bottom, can have a couple of good results, and they're right back in the mix. Clear of the bottom two potentially. So, with Penabont, who were destined or identified early on in the summer as being one to compete at the top, they're in the bottom six. Barrytown United this week have also, seemingly signed two great players. So we need, like as you said, we need to be ready for probably the toughest phase two in your time at the club then, is it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on. I think
Mm,
we've been to a couple of away games, and a couple of games at home where it's been unbelievably comfortable over the last season and the season before.
mm,
And we were pretty sure before we went there, as long as we performed, we'd win.
mm,
I think you're right. You underperform against any of these teams in the bottom six this year, and you'll be very lucky to get what you want.
mm.
So again, I think attitudes and performances are going to have to be, high
Gone.
if we want to achieve what we want to achieve.
Fingers crossed. I'm counting down the days already until phase two kicks off. These weeks without football now are going to be tough. But um, the last few months, then a former player of ours, Declan Carroll, has been training with the club. He's been announced now. He's signed on the dotted line. He is a part of the squad. He's obviously got experience at Cymru Premier level already with us, with Aberystwyth and with Carmarthen. What perhaps you haven't seen Dex before the last few months that he's been coming training and finding his fitness. What have you been? What are your thoughts on Dex in training so far?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a word there that I think you spot on with his experience. He's been very impressive in training. I hadn't seen him before until he came training, but I've been really impressed with him. He's and funny enough, I've had a few phone calls telling me how good he is,
Yeah,
especially on the ball. So I think what we've lacked is, and Jazz was in the European experience, but if you think of the players we've lost in Dylan and
yeah,
Scotcher, Pats, a lot of our experience is gone. Um,
mm.
a fairly young team, so I think Dex might he'll bring a bit of ability and creativity, we hope, but he'll also bring a bit of experience, which I think the younger players need.
I think his experience being at the club at a young age will lend itself to some of the youngsters we've got there in the changing room. And again, his ability is still there, certainly. So, yeah, fingers crossed to him. And I think there was a chance that we could have seen him back in action at the Oggy Bridge Meadow Stadium this weekend. We were scheduled to be facing Cardiff City under 21s. But as you can see, the pitch has fallen foul to the bitterly cold weather we've had this week. So it's going to be a couple of weeks before we see Dex and the rest of the boys back in action, because obviously the phase two fixtures came out this morning. And if you want to see those, please visit, again, the club's social media accounts. It's going to be a very tight affair, as we've discussed. Many clubs are going to have that seventh spot sort of within the crosshairs, I suppose, and aspirations for them to get into the playoffs that way. Again, Tony's referred to them as 10 cup finals for us in front. But what are the plans then? So will training continue over the next few weeks in the build-up to that game?
Yes, yeah. Listen, we've only trained once this week, so you give the players a little bit. We play Saturday, and then it's back to our usual routine, making sure we get enough training in, another game if we need it, and then just making sure that it come Aberystwyth, we're ready. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, as I said, counting down the days to that first league fixture of phase 2. But it's been fascinating talking to you. As I said, a glittering career that you've had. It very much felt like this is your life going through it. But I'm sure people have learned even more about you, your playing career and your coaching career. Strap yourselves in, then, I think, is the message you're saying for phase 2. It's going to be a bumpy one. It's going to be an enjoyable one, and hopefully, come the end of April, we're heading towards the playoffs, and perhaps we'll have a catch up closer to that date. But no, I really appreciate your time, mate. I can't believe this has almost been an hour. It feels like 10 minutes when I talk to you and you go through stories. It's tremendous, mate. But I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you at the Augie Bridge Meadow.
Thanks, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.